Tonight, we drift along the autumn roads of Bavaria in the year 1850, a weary journeyman printer following a ribbon of paper lanterns that shimmer through the dusk and promise rest, warmth, and a story lit by gentle flames. If you enjoy this video, please consider subscribing. Now take a deep breath, get comfortable, and let's begin our journey to a lantern-lit Bavarian village, where early winter begins not with fear, but with light. You follow the road as it softens from afternoon into evening, the surface dark with recent rain and patched with shallow mirrors that tremble under your step. Your boots are heavy with damp, each tread a careful placing of weight to spare your legs for whatever distance remains before a roof can be found. The sky presses low, a pewter wash that spits at intervals, not enough to drench you, just enough to sneak under your collar and find the seam of your cuffs. You keep your breath measured and your stride even, counting without numbers, letting the rhythm of walking carry you forward the way a press carries the carriage along its rails. The thought of a bed rises and settles, as practical as the thought of bread, not a luxury so much as a calculation against the light left in the day and the coins left in your purse. You listen for carts, hoping for company, or at least a hint of where the next village might tuck itself against the folds of the hills. The road curves between hedges and low stone walls, and your eyes trace each bend as if it were a line of type needing to be justified. Your pack rides high between your shoulder blades, straps tightening with the damp and the pull of weight, the printed samples inside pressed flat and guarded against the weather by waxed paper and care. You know the order of them without looking: a folio of type specimens, a handful of broadsides edged with ornament, a few small pamphlets bound in string, all smelling faintly of lampblack and linseed oil. There is a letter, too, tucked in a separate sleeve and sealed with a careful hand, addressed to a bookseller in Munich, whose name you have repeated like a charm to keep the route clear in your mind. When you shift your shoulders, the pack creaks like well-oiled wood, and the sound reminds you of the press, of the way rollers whisper over ink plates, and the platen descends with patient certainty. Ink finds its way into everything, you think, even when you are days from a workshop, for your fingers still carry the ghost of it, and your pocket still holds a folded scrap printed with a stray flourish. Hunger sits quietly beneath these thoughts, not urgent yet, but attentive, taking note of bakeries you have passed and measuring the taste of rain against the memory of rye. To walk is to keep adding small lines to a page that has no margin except the one darkness will soon draw. The hills around you settle into their autumn colors with a kind of inwardness, beeches giving up their copper leaves to damp ditches, firs holding fast to their deep green with a dark shine. Pastures slope away, cropped close, the grasses peppered with mushrooms that gleam like buttons where the light touches them. Here and there a wayside shrine stands with a little roof of tile and a painted figure behind glass, a candle gutted out in a puddle of wax that tells you someone passed this way before the rain began. The air carries wood smoke in faint threads, sweet and resinous, the scent slipping between the fresher smell of wet earth and the clean iron hint that rides with drizzle. A rook lifts from a fence post as you near and draws a line across the low sky, a smudge at the edge of cloud, and somewhere in the trees a stream makes its small, constant work beneath the wind. Cart ruts shine like lead as they run ahead of you and vanish around a bend, and where the road breaks a little on a slope, you can see the stone chips of recent repair glinting like salt. A milestone leans by a stand of alders, numbers worn to suggestion, and you do not stop to study it, because knowing and not knowing have the same result. You keep walking. Your money weighs too little to be comforting, and you hold the purse at your belt as if its smallness might be steadied by your touch. You bring to mind the prices you have paid at other inns on other nights, a bed in a shared room for a handful of kreutzer, a bowl of soup thrown in with it if the innkeeper is generous, or a little less if you sleep in the loft above the stable and do not ask for more than a mug of cider. There is no shame in the loft, you tell yourself, because hay has a kind of warmth that the body recognizes, and a horse is decent company when the hour grows thin. What you hope for most is a table where you can sit without hurry, your pack at your feet, the letter kept dry on your person, and a chance to let your shoulders unwind while you listen to other people sum their day aloud. The road sets the terms, and you accept them. Step after step, the patience of a compositor arranging letters, spacing each piece until the line fits snug in the stick. Sometimes a carriage passes with a rubbered hush and a clop of hooves, and you nod without expecting a reply, because a traveller is a ghost until he is inside a doorway framed by light. You count the exchanges you might offer for a bed, news of a printer in Augsburg, a neat repair to a creaking signboard hinge, small trades that have eased your way before. As the daylight thins to a pewter edge, the landscape spreads itself wider and softer, and a valley opens gradually beyond a low rise, like a page being eased out from under a hand. You pause at the crest not because you choose to, but because the ground asks you to arrange yourself differently for the descent, to set your feet with care on stones made slick by drizzle and fallen leaves. The air feels cooler here, sheltered and still, and you can hear the wind move high up the slope, then drop away as if the hills had quietly closed a door. A bell somewhere to your right takes up a timid voice, not the full toll of Sunday, but the half-thought chime that guides daily tasks, and the sound helps you find a line through the grey. Wood smoke thickens, and under it there is the homey scent of something starchy and warm, perhaps potatoes or barley simmering, a kitchen smell that travels even in thin air. Your eyes adjust to the deepening colour of evening, until the path shows itself as a deeper strip against the paler grasses, and your stride flattens into a careful, downhill rhythm. You become aware, before you can be sure, of a flicker where the valley floor should be, not a single fire or lamplight, but a scatter that seems to sway and gather, then break apart again like minnows in a shallow stream. The glow resolves only by degrees, as if the dusk wants to keep its secret a little longer, and you find yourself slowing to let it tell you what it is without being hurried. It is not the fixed shine of windows or the steady block of a smithy door, but movement, clustered and deliberate, as though the lights were being carried along a path with a tenderness you do not yet understand. Colours play in it, small oranges and reds, a pale yellow here and there, muffling themselves behind whatever shields them from wind and wet. And now and then a darker shape crosses, like a child running a step to catch up, then settling back into the pace. Your mouth is dry and your shoulders ache, but the ache loosens a little with the sight, not because you feel claimed by it, but because the road has given you something other than itself to look toward. You weigh your options without drama, keep to the verge and pass around the edge of the village if it is a private celebration, or enter quietly and let your manner explain your poverty before your purse must. The rain hesitates, the bell lapses, and the valley fills with those moving specks of warmth, and you stand for a moment longer than you intended, listening to the hush gathered at the margins of the lights. When you start down again, you step as softly as you can, a stranger with a pack of paper and ink, walking toward a pattern of brightness whose welcome, if it is won, is not yet yours to claim. From the ridge path, a ribbon of colour threads the valley, and you stop where the hedgerow gathers the dusk into a soft, breathing wall. The lanterns below move at the pace of footsteps, little globes of painted paper rocking as if cradled by the evening itself. Air slips cold against your cheek and smells of damp leaves, turned earth, and a faint sweetness that might be apples stored for winter. You steady your pack against your back and feel the corners of your wrapped samples press through the cloth. A sheet of type specimens, a broadsheet calendar proof, a modest almanac leaf set in clean, careful lines. Somewhere beneath your jacket, the letter of introduction rustles in its oilskin fold, as if to remind you it has weight even if your purse does not. Between the lights and the first stars lies the pale band of the road, and the space it measures feels longer than it is. By the bramble gate you listen, and the sound that reaches you is gentle enough to make you doubt it for a moment. There is singing, low and unhurried, the sort of tune that lingers more in the bones than in the ears, and it carries on the wind like a shawl shaken over your shoulders. A dog barks once, but very far off, and then the chorus thickens and thins, voices like candle flame bending to a draught. You picture a village you have not yet seen, a square around a linden tree, a well bucket, an inn sign creaking softly. And you picture also the faces that sometimes meet a stranger's step with caution first. You have arrived at odd hours in poor light before, and you remember being measured from cap to soles while a door stayed half shut. A lantern procession promises cheer, but cheer can be a fence as easily as a welcome, and it is easier to watch than to ask. You take stock in the old way taught by long roads and longer apprenticeships, beginning at your boots and walking upward. The leather is scuffed and damp from a day of uncertain rain, but it has not split, and the laces will hold for one more slope. Your feet throb in a polite, persistent way that suggests warm boards by a stove would be best, but not strictly required, and your hands are nicked where lead has cut the skin in fine grey lines that never quite wash out. In your pack, the wrapped work shifts when you breathe, a stack of clean impressions that smell faintly of linseed oil and dust, borders in simple ornaments, a verse set in a steady fracture hand, meant to show that you can lay out a page with care. At your breast, the letter sits like a polite companion at the edge of a table, signed by the small-town pastor who paid you fairly and promised that any Munich bookseller with an eye for tidy work might take a chance. Your purse answers to a touch with the light clink of a few coins, enough perhaps for a bowl and a slice, enough perhaps to bargain down to a corner bench and a ladle of cider if your words are right and the mood of the room is good. You watch the procession a while, and let your eyes adjust until the moving lights thicken into shapes. Some lanterns are round as harvest moons, others cut and pasted into stars or boats or simple houses with black windows painted on their sides, and each swings from a stick carried with great care. Behind the glow you catch the suggestion of small figures bundled into coats and shawls, their steps careful on the lane, and here and there a taller shape whose stride sets the pace. The song rising from them is not a ballad's tale, but something simpler, made to be remembered and repeated until the night wears thin. Even from this distance you can hear how the melody gathers the walkers into one unhurried line. The sight of it presses at you with two equal hands, one warm, inviting as a door opened to you in winter, and the other cool, reminding you how quickly a room can decide you do not belong. Between those hands you stand, letting your breath enter and leave as if it were another traveller with a bundle, also choosing the road. The sky holds its light the way ink holds a page, firm at the edges, paler in the middle where the valley keeps the day a little longer. You think through your own first lines the way you think through a column of type, spacing each small piece until it fits. You will step from the shade and greet whoever crosses your path with a word that sits between deference and confidence, not servile, not proud, and you test it in your mouth to feel how it might sound after the climb. You picture the inn and the person who keeps its keys, the price of a place near the stove, the way a request goes farther when it is accompanied by something to show, and a manner that wastes no one's time. You rehearse the mention of your letter without placing it too early, and you decide which sheet to draw first from your portfolio so the light will fall on clean margins and crisp impression. It occurs to you that a printed song pasted to a broadside, 2 stanzas, a border of small leaves, might, in a place where lanterns are already burning, be a pleasing thing to offer the eye, and the thought steadies you. You think of Munich as one sometimes thinks of a city far down a river, a place that feels both inevitable and very far away, and you accept that tonight you need only cross the space between hedgerow and lane. Decision forms not as a leap, but as a settling, the way paper settles to a frisket before the press descends. You tighten the strap on your shoulder until the pack sits close, and you set your cap more firmly against the drift of the wind, as if to keep your thoughts from fraying at the edges. Your legs answer the first step with a familiar ache that is neither complaint nor welcome, simply a statement that they have carried you this far and will carry you farther. The gate's wooden latch lifts with a small squeak that seems bold in the quiet but lasts less than a breath, and then you are through, with hedge on one side and the slope opening to your right. Down the path the lanterns move untroubled, and in their untroubled motion you find a rhythm you can safely join without catching at the attention of any single watcher. You do not hurry, and you do not delay. You simply let the path draw you toward the village edge, feeling caution walk beside you like a shadow, and warmth ahead of you like the promise of a room lit from within. You follow the lane toward the moving glow, and the first face you meet is a bundled child whose lantern bobbles like a small moon on a stick. The little one does not stop, only looks up, and a woman just behind calls softly that it is St. Martin's evening. Then the procession carries them onward with the steady hush of many feet on damp earth. You go on at the verge of the road, letting the river of light slip past you at its unhurried pace, and you notice the shapes of the lanterns. Some are boxes brushed with red and gold, others are round as apples, and a few are tin with tiny holes pricked into constellations. The air smells of cold leaves and warm wax, and the curls of smoke from candle wicks lift into the dusk like pale threads. Far ahead, a single handbell gives a patient tremor, not a clamour, just enough to gather walkers at a corner and keep the line together. Your boots tap against the stones, and you keep your distance, listening for the tone of the evening, certain now that the lights are not a fair or a market, but something gentler, with the quiet assurance of a habit kept year after year. You think of how the tale at the heart of the night began, and how simple stories keep their shape even as customs change. Long before presses and paper samples and letters of introduction, Martin of Tours served as a soldier of Rome, and on a cold road he met a beggar whose rags could not keep out the wind. Martin drew his cloak and cut it, giving half to the man and keeping half for himself. The telling goes that he dreamed of Christ wearing that same half-cloak, and he left the army, sought baptism, and became known for kindness that did not wait for a better season. Later, to his own surprise, he was chosen as bishop. The memory of his act spread across lands and languages, carried by monks who copied lives of the saints, and by travellers who shared what they had heard by firelight. In the early Middle Ages, the battered half-cloak, the capa, was kept as a royal relic by Frankish kings, and the place where it was housed was called a little cappa, a capella, from which the words chapel and chaplain would come, a small shelter of cloth becoming a word for a room and a role. Parish communities marked his feast in early November with candles and prayers and with alms for the poor before the deep cold, and the date slipped easily into the rhythm of the year, a hinge between harvest finished and winter begun. Hired hands settled their terms, tithe barns closed their doors, and with evenings stretching longer, a walk with song and light became a way to warm the road together. By the 19th century in German-speaking towns and valleys like this one, that long habit had softened into a children's holiday, and the sight before you fits that shape. Lanterns now are cut from paper, sometimes oiled so they will resist a drop of rain, and tied to light rods with twine. Tin workers punch patterns so that stars bloom on walls when the wind turns a corner. You hear small voices practice verses about warmth, sharing, and a kind horseman who pauses in the cold, and the answers come from parents and grandparents in lower tones that strengthen the tune without pressing it forward. There are no grand displays here, only a basket passed with little biscuits, a handful of nuts, an apple pressed into a mittened palm, and the soft exchange of thank yous that seem as much a part of the ritual as the flame itself. Sometimes, in places richer than this, a rider will appear with a dark cloak and a wooden sword, but tonight the figure in front is a schoolmaster with a lantern shaped like a shield. Keep in an even step so no one is left behind. You notice the careful work on a few paper panes, watercolor leaves, a simple cross, a cutout of a goose for harvest's end, and you think of the hands that drew them at kitchen tables, of the way a household's afternoon can turn into a small light that travels. The procession does not rush. It winds along the lanes like a stream finding its level, and with each turn you recognize how the path through the village becomes the story's outline walked aloud. As you keep pace near the hedge, you understand that what looks like pageantry from a distance is more like a conversation the village holds with itself, repeated each year so the youngest learn the words. The memory of generosity is the center, but the custom is also practical kindness, a chance to see who might need another log, who has a torn coat, who has been alone too many evenings in a row. The candles give off a steady glow that paints each face with softness, and in that light your travel-worn sleeves and the straps of your portfolio seem less out of place than they did on the ridge an hour ago. You think of broadsides you once set for a feast day in a different town, of the black letters marching in even lines to tell a story much older than any press, and of how type and tune both carry meaning when they are made with care. A woman pauses to adjust a child's scarf, and, seeing you, nods as if to say, "There is room at the path's edge for one more pair of footsteps that will not break the rhythm." You do not join the center of the line, but the lanterns do not close against you. They breathe like a living border that widens when needed, and you walk on, listening, a stranger who has learned the name of the light. The village receives you by way of stones that gleam like small ponds, each cobble holding a shallow cup of the failed daylight and the recent rain. Your boots find a rhythm on the slick slope, careful and slow, while from the hollow of the valley the glow of lanterns lifts and settles as if the dusk itself were breathing. Wood smoke threads the air, calm and familiar, with the faint sweetness of apples riding above it, and the sharper scent of damp wool rises from your coat. Houses lean in with painted shutters and low eaves, their gutters dripping with a patient tap that keeps time with your steps. Somewhere a bell notes the hour without insistence, its sound softened by mist and distance, and voices coil through alleyways, gentle as the lanterns swaying on their poles. At the square, warmth collects like a tide, pooling around a building whose windows shine clouded and bright, their panes filmed with steam and lamplight. The inn looks like a hearth someone has set in the middle of the world, and when the door opens and a worn gust of heat and talk rolls out, you cross the threshold without needing to announce yourself. Inside, the room holds a weather of its own, bread heat, sausage smoke, and the tang of cider mixing into a good fog that curls around your face and hands. Benches run tight to the walls, a black iron stove ticks in the corner, and coats hang heavy as drapery from pegs near the door, releasing damp as they warm. The innkeeper sees the road on you first, the water on your hat brim, the mud laddering your boots, and answers your nod with one of his own, measured and sure, as if he has steadied many travellers at this hour. You ask for a room and something hot to eat, your voice low from the day's long economy, and he gestures to a table with the practical kindness of a man who keeps lights burning. Coins, counted without fuss, pass to his hand. He makes them disappear, and in their place he leaves a key and a promise of food. A serving girl threads between elbows with a towel over one shoulder and a pitcher that fogs the air. She sets it down and smiles at your case, the wooden one scuffed by pavements from Nuremberg to this valley. You shrink your satchel to your feet, lean the sample case safely against your shin, and let your shoulders inch away from your ears as warmth climbs back through your coat. Supper arrives the way hunger likes best, unfussy and immediate, sturdy on the table and confident of its purpose. The rye loaf gives under the knife with a soft crackle, its crust thick and earthy, its crumb dense enough to feel like a promise in your hand. And when you drag it through mustard, the grain blooms with sour and smoke. Sausages glisten in their own shallow pool, browns and reds showing where the skillet kissed them, and when your teeth break the casing, there is a gentle snap, then thyme and fat and pepper steadying your mouth. The cider is not wine and does not pretend, but it is bright and patient and carries orchard air into your chest, a small summer folded into late autumn. Heat moves from your palms into your forearms and finally into your chest, loosening the thin wire that fatigue had drawn around your ribs, and you become aware again of the layered sound in the room. Spoons on plates, a baby's thick breath, a low laugh from men with plaster dust still on their cuffs. Outside, a song drifts past like a lantern that is not sure where to rest, a child's chorus with a rhythm meant for short legs, and the cadence reassures even if the words do not yet resolve. You eat, unhurried, the bench steady beneath you, and the feeling that had followed you down from the ridge, that you might be an unwelcome footnote at the edge of some private celebration, begins to dissolve at the corners. Curiosity finds you in the natural moment after hunger is named and answered, when voices around your table fold you in without crowding. A mason with a beard caught with lime asks what tools must live in a printer's kit, and a woman with ink-dark hair wonders how many hands a book borrows before it is born, and you rest the sample case on the table to show rather than explain. You draw out a sheet where clean Roman type stands in even ranks, its serifs small and sure, the white between the lines breathing like a margin of fresh snow. Beside it, a page in neat black letter carries the older weight of German prayer books and proclamations, its strokes dense and angular but crisp, where the letters lift from the page. Borders, modest and tight to the text, frame a third sheet with vines and small geometries, a pretty order that suits wedding announcements and the calendars that hang in kitchens near the stove. Lamplight pools along the paper and shows its tooth, the faint shadow of bite where type met pulp and left its intention, and a carpenter runs a thumb near, careful not to smudge, admiring the impression the way he might admire a clean mortise. You speak of spacing and leading, of ink ground to a gloss that dries with patience, of the way a good press breathes at the downstroke and sighs on the lift, and the questions come softly, not to test you but to enjoy the craft through your steadied telling. A boy who has been listening with both hands around his mug asks whether the books in Munich smell the way these pages do, and you admit that paper is a perfume all its own, whether in a royal binding or a pamphlet meant for a pocket. The innkeeper returns with a small plate of cheese and a second cup, poured modestly, saying he has a son who carries a lantern tonight in the shape of a star. And would you mind if he looked at the sheet with the vines when the procession goes by? You tell him the sheet is meant to be looked at, and he gives you that same nod as before, weighty and without ornament, the kind that makes a room feel as if it has remembered you from another year. Families shift, gathering coats and scarves, and a door opens to the square with a hinge sigh that invites the cool air in without letting the warmth escape entirely. The music outside grows a little rounder, the steps more organized, and for a moment the whole room pauses with you in its center, listening the way people listen when something simple and beloved approaches. The girl with the pitcher brings a cloth and wipes a cleared space near your elbow, as if to mark the table's small stage for the pages. And the mason says he once set type for a parish flyer when he was young, badly, and still loved the smell of it. In the lull that follows, you realize you have not thought about your purse or the long miles to Munich for several minutes, not because the distance has shortened, but because this square, this table, this heat have made it bearable to hold. Lanterns pass the inn like a shoal of slow fish, bright bodies gliding and dimming in turn as they move beyond and then beneath the fogged panes, and you see their colors through the film: amber, cherry, a winter blue that someone managed with tissue and care. Children's faces hover behind their own light, their hats pulled low and their scarves arranged by careful hands. Some carry paper globes painted with stars, some carry cutwork houses with windows glowing, and one small child shoulders a lantern made from a hollowed turnip, its grin mild and silly. The song rises and falls with their steps, more murmur than melody at this distance, and a father's voice threads through it now and then to adjust the key or the pace without scolding. Inside, no one claps and no one shouts. Instead, chairs draw closer to the glass, mugs rest on tables, and the inn breathes in time with the procession outside. You stand with them, still a traveller, still damp at the cuffs, still a man with a letter to deliver. But you are within a circle that did not ask you who you were before it opened. As lanterns drift on towards the church, and then the lanes beyond, their light leaves after images on the glass that fade slowly, like type lifted from paper but still legible in memory. And you feel the evening place its gentle hand between your shoulders and keep it there. From the window seat above the square, you settle into a patch of warmth where the pane holds a skin of faint steam, and the cider in your hand sends up a shy apple sweetness. Outside, the lanterns drift along the lane in measured clusters, their colours mellow and ripe against the dusk, as if the night had sprouted quiet fruit. Paper shades, stars, moons, tiny cottages tilt and right themselves with each careful step, while their tin frames wink with pinpricks of flame. The children's voices rise and soften, a simple refrain that swells like a gentle wave and ebbs again, leaving only the hush of feet on cobbles and the rustle of cloaks. Somewhere at the head of the line, a rider passes, cape draped over his shoulders, the silhouette almost certainly meant to recall St. Martin, and the horse's hooves make a calm, hollow note that steadies your breath. Heat from the hearth spreads through the soles of your shoes into your legs, and your damp cuffs, heavy from the road, begin to dry and crisp at the seams. The inn smells of wood smoke and fresh-cut rye, and the light from the tap-room lies across the floor like a woven blanket. You draw your parcel of samples a little closer on your lap, the pasteboard corners softened by travel, and allow the music outside to fold around you in broad, slow layers. Out beyond the sill, winter waits politely at the edge of the village, but in here the air is tender and bright, and you feel your shoulders loosen by degrees. At the long table by the window, a mason with lime still in the knuckles of his hands nods toward your bundle and asks which letters you favor for a sign over a town hall or a school. You tell him that in these parts a strong black letter, fracture, with its upright back and split strokes, still pleases many eyes, especially for proclamations and church notices, while the rounded Roman letters, the Antiqua, read more easily in the small sizes for science and travel guides. He smiles at the names as if they were two old acquaintances at a doorway, and he traces an arch in the air, remembering how a chiseled serif catches sunlight on a threshold. A cooper across from him, sleeves rolled, wonders how fast a hand press can truly go, and you answer that a steady pair, one to ink and one to pull, might manage a few hundred good impressions in an hour if the formulae is well locked and the paper not too damp. Their surprise is gentle, more admiration than disbelief, and hands reach for your sheets with the care a master gives a tool. The paper bears the faint nap of rag and the clean bite of type. Ink settled into its fibres with the sheen of linseed and lamp black, and you feel a small pulse of pride at the even texture of the blacks and the light touch in the margins. One sample shows a compact calendar for the year, with saints' days and market fairs. Another holds a booklet title with a modest flourish on the capital M, the strokes balanced, the colour even across the line. The mason asks about spacing, and you explain the thin pieces of metal, hair spaces, enquads, that keep words breathing, each glyph sitting with just enough room to belong. The table hums with small talk, and the scrape of knives, and the lanterns outside drift on, bright islands floating down a black river. As the songs fold into one another, you find yourself telling the easy parts of your craft, the parts that soothe like a practiced tune played by lamplight. You describe the composing stick warm in your palm, the cases open like shallow drawers of stars, lower case at your belly and upper case above, the old names that link a printer's bench to the shape of language itself. You speak of setting a measure that suits the page, of feeling the weight of a line click into rightness, and of the small tilt of wrist that tucks a thin space where it needs to live. The cooper listens as if it were a tale about weather and season, nodding when you mention how the formie is locked in the chase, coins turned with a key until everything holds like staves tightened by hoops. By the mid-19th century, you say softly, the ink no longer comes from beaten balls alone. Composition rollers give a steadier coat, and the tympan and frisket swing down together, their cloth and paper carefully packed in make-ready to sweeten the impression. Someone asks about the smell that lingers on printers, and you admit it is a blend of oil and soot with a thread of paper dust, a scent that clings to cuffs and, to those who love it, feels like a promise of order. Your letter for the bookseller in Munich lies safe against your chest, folded tight with a neat hand at the bottom, and the thought of that shop, quiet shelves, an iron press ticking in the back, sits in your mind like a lamp that will still be burning when you arrive. All the while, supper stays simple and kind on your tongue, rye bread with its clean, sour edge, sausages that release their warmth in small bursts, and the cider rounding it all with light sweetness. The talk has the soft cadence of neighbours indoors while a celebration passes, present but not pressing, near and yet at the right distance. When the last cluster of lights turns past the fountain and disappears down the far lane, the square loosens its breath and grows still, holding only a faint ash of glow where the procession has gone. You remain at the window with the others, not quite speaking. watching as the night gathers itself again around the shuttered stalls and the wellhead, now striped with reflections from the inn's lamps. Somewhere a door closes with a careful hand, and a father's murmur follows a child up the stairs, the day folded quietly into the great pocket of the village. Your samples have made their way back to you, edges warmed by many palms, and the mason says that if a notice is needed for the guild or the school, your letters would do well enough. You answer with thanks that feel unforced, and the innkeeper brings another small cup, as if to seal the welcome, the cider pale as straw and bright against the shadowed room. The feeling that had lingered at the edge of your thoughts on the road, the worry of arriving unannounced, of being stopped at a threshold, has thinned until it is only a thread you can see through. You picture the morning as a gentle start rather than a test, your pack squared and your boots true, the road to Munich a ribbon with clear edges after rain. In the hearth the wood settles and sighs, and the grain of the table under your forearms feels like a map with roots worn smooth by many journeys. When you finally rise to seek your bed, the circle of light has widened enough to include your small corner, and you carry its warmth with you up the creaking stair, ready to close your eyes and rise with the first pale wash of day. Later, when the square has thinned to murmurs and the inn settles into its evening hush, you sit with your hands around a cooling mug and feel the day loosen. The shutters are drawn against the breeze. A seam of lantern glow escapes through the cracks and lays a pale ribbon across the table. From the hearth comes the soft negotiation of wood and ember, the tiny sighs of flame finding air. You breathe with it, slow and unhurried, as if each exhale is a page turned without sound. What stays with you is not the clamour of travel or the sums in your purse, but the simple grammar of light and kindness. A door opened, a seat offered, a question asked about your trade, your hands, the way you set a line so it carries the thought, straight and true. You consider how your craft lives in these quiet places. Lead letters lifted one by one, aligned into sense, ink rolled until it gleams, paper meeting the form, and then the press descending with steady weight. The work is patient. It trusts the rhythm of repetition. So too does the road. Each step sets type in the long composition of your days, each village a margin where the words breathe. Outside, the last of the children's songs fades to a thread. You catch a fragment of melody, something about warmth in winter and a lamp held high, and it meets your heartbeat in a gentle, easy measure. The house timber creaks as it settles. Someone laughs once softly from the next room. The innkeeper's cat pads across the flagged floor and stops in your doorway, choosing, as cats do, the spot that is neither wholly yours nor wholly the corridor. It blinks, decides there is no decision to make, and curls into a perfect comma, pausing the night. You think of the letter of introduction folded in your satchel, the Munich bookseller's name written in a firm hand. Tomorrow the road rises again. But this knowledge does not tug at you. It rests like a bookmark between pages, keeping your place without hurry. You imagine the press you will visit, its flywheel turning like a measured breath, its staccato rhythm softened by oil and habit. You remember the scent of linseed and metal, the way paper feels when it takes the ink. No drama, only contact, a meeting that leaves both changed. The lanterns beyond the window gutter lower, their wicks drawing neat halos that hover and then settle. Wax cools. Footsteps recede to paths and thresholds. The night arranges itself around you with the considerate order of type in a case, each piece where it belongs. You let your shoulders sink. Warmth holds to your sleeves, your cheek, the crown of your head. In this quiet, the road is no longer a line you must follow, but a thread woven through friendly cloth. The small brightness carried by each person, by each lantern, each word shared across a table, has stitched a place for you to rest. You don't need to name it. You only need to ease into it, weightless as ash rising, sure as ink drying to a soft sheen. The mug is empty and content to be so. The fire breathes once more and then settles. You draw the blanket up and let the last faint glimmer from the square travel over your closed eyes and pass, as gentle as a page finally laid to rest,